She said it was a Christmas emergency. Her mother-in-law was sick, but one photo, sun-soaked and smiling, told a different story. I sat alone at a table set for three, while they clinked cocktails in paradise. One message, I hit send, and in less than 5 words, she shattered everything. The roast had been in the oven for 2 hours before I stopped checking on it. By then, the meat was past tender and edging toward dry, but I couldn't bring myself to turn off the heat. It was something to do, something to pretend for. The table was already set. Pine green cloth napkins folded into triangles, my best china, the crystal glasses with the tiny etching of holly leaves near the rim. Even the gravy boat, which I only ever used once a year, sat at the center like a lonely guest. I'd arranged the seating carefully, 3 places. One for me, one for Laurel, one for Isla, my granddaughter, but they weren't coming. The call had come that morning around 9:17 a.m. I remember the exact time because I was slicing apples for the pie and the knife slipped when I saw her name on the screen. Mom, Laurel had said too quickly, I'm so sorry, but we're not going to make it. Georgia's not doing well. She had a flare-up overnight and Clark doesn't want to leave her alone. We're going to stay with her through the weekend. There was a long silence on my end. I heard Isla in the background asking if they were still going to decorate the sand snowman. Then Laurel's breath, caught between guilt and conviction. I know this is last minute, she said. I swallowed. Of course, family comes first. She didn't hear the catch in my voice, or maybe she did and she let it pass. After I hung up, I placed the knife down, wiped my hands, and stood at the kitchen sink for a long time, staring at the snow outside. It was the kind that coated the world like powdered sugar, silent and soft, the kind that used to make Laurel squeal when she was Isla's age. The stockings were already hung, mine, Laurel's, and a new one I'd embroidered this year for Isla. I'd stayed up late finishing it, stitching little stars and the first letter of her name in bright red thread. It hung by the fireplace, plump and waiting. No one would open it. I moved through the house like someone trying to keep a ghost from following, turned off the music, dimmed the lights, carried the roast to the table and set it down, even though I had no one to serve it to. The silence was thick. I poured a glass of wine, took a sip, then another. I know what people would say, that it's just one holiday, that families change, that I should be grateful I'm still here, still able to cook, still able to set a table. But the wound wasn't just the absence, it was the way it was done. The way I was told last minute, like I was a calendar appointment that could be canceled without consequence. Clark's mother, Georgia, had always been sick in some vague, ever-present way. Migraines, rheumatism, nerves. I wasn't surprised she'd had a flare-up. I was only surprised Laurel still bought it. My late husband, Henry, used to say, the holidays were about making memories, not matching expectations. But he had never been forgotten at the table he carved. He died 6 years ago on December 22nd. The Christmas after was brutal, but Laurel had brought Isla, just a baby then, and we lit a candle in his name. We sang, we wept, we held each other. That was the last time it felt like tradition held weight. Now I wonder if it was just inertia, me dragging the holidays behind me like a sled with no passengers. I sat down at the head of the table. The roast steamed quietly, the gravy congealed, the napkin stayed folded. I reached across to where Isla would have sat and touched the rim of her glass. I imagined her there, laughing at the tree ornaments, asking for more mashed potatoes, humming along to the carols on the record player. Instead, she was likely splashing in a pool or helping decorate her grandmother's tropical wreath. I didn't blame her. She was a child. Children love wherever they're made to feel welcome. It was Laurel I couldn't stop thinking about. She used to call me her favorite person in the world. I have a box full of her handmade cards that say so. I used to be the one who brushed her hair, who whispered songs when her stomach hurt, who held her through the divorce of her first fiancé and told her it wasn't her fault. Now I was the one she disappointed without ceremony. I looked at my plate. I hadn't taken a bite. 1,000 questions pressed behind my ribs. Was I too needy? Did I make her feel guilty for living her own life? Was this the slow turning of time, where mothers fade into background figures behind stronger, louder in-laws? I reached for my phone. Scrolled past a few texts from Renee, my neighbor, asking for updates. I opened a new message to Laurel, typed, "I hope Georgia feels better. Merry Christmas." Then I deleted it. Typed again, "The roast turned out beautifully. Just wish you were here." Deleted again. Finally, I typed nothing. I put the phone down. Outside, snow continued to fall. I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and turned off the lights on the tree. Then I folded the napkins one by one, slid the plates back into the hutch, put the untouched food into Tupperware, not bothering to label it. In the quiet hum of the refrigerator door closing, I felt the weight of every Christmas past push down into the bones of this one. And for the first time since Henry's funeral, I allowed myself to sit in the middle of the empty house and say aloud what I'd only ever dared to feel. I am not too much. I'm just no longer enough for the people I love. The room said nothing back, but it didn't have to. The quiet after Christmas was different than the quiet before it. Before it held hope, possibility, a low hum of anticipation that something beautiful might still happen. After, it was an ache, a kind of stillness that didn't comfort, but accused. I spent the day in my robe, no makeup, no lipstick, even though I'd laid out the tube next to the bathroom sink like I always did. The television played old holiday reruns in the background, their laughter forced and bright. I muted it after a while. At some point, I made tea. Chamomile, though it tasted like memory more than anything soothing. As I stirred the honey in, I thought about my mother, Sylvia Whitmore. She was the kind of woman who wore lipstick to answer the door and practiced her smile in mirrors. Our Christmases growing up were polished affairs, photographs posed in front of trees, turkey carved with surgical precision, and gifts that looked expensive but felt impersonal. She hosted parties more than she celebrated holidays, and every moment was an opportunity to be seen by neighbors, the church committee, the country club, but not by me. I remember being 6, showing her the ornament I made in school, a lump of clay meant to resemble a snowman. Lumpy, messy, clearly handmade. She took it between her fingers like it might stain her blouse. "Let's put it on the back of the tree," she said. Out of sight. That's where I learned that affection wasn't the same as approval. She never hit, never raised her voice, but she had a way of looking at you that made you shrink. By the time I was 15, I had mastered silence. By 20, I was polite to survive. So when Henry came into my life, gentle, patient Henry with his calloused hands and crooked laugh, I clung to him like a lifeline. He didn't need perfection. He needed presence. And when Laurel was born, I swore I would be different. I read every parenting book I could find in the early 90s. I told her I loved her every day, sometimes twice. I held her when she cried, let her see me cry too. I framed every school drawing, even the ones that were just scribbles. I never wanted her to question her place in my heart, but somewhere along the way, she learned that vulnerability was something to be managed, not embraced. Clark didn't help. The first time I met him, he shook my hand like I was a client, not his girlfriend's mother. His smile was tight, his compliments rehearsed. When I hugged him, he tensed like I'd overstepped. "Boundaries," Laurel explained once. He grew up in a very structured home. Structured, I would learn, meant distant. He never said anything cruel, but his praise for Laurel always came with qualifiers. "You're so strong," for someone raised by a single mom. "You've really created stability, especially given your background." He never said my name unless necessary, only "your mother." At holidays, he'd scroll his phone during dinner. When Laurel laughed too loud, he'd glance sideways like it embarrassed him. Still, I tried. I made space. I didn't ask for more than I thought he could give. I let Laurel come to me when she needed, and when she began to pull away, less calls, shorter visits, I told myself it was just adulthood. She had her own family now, that's what everyone says, but it never felt natural, it felt strategic. That evening, as the tea cooled in my cup, my phone buzzed, a message from Renee. "Thought you might want to see this. Sorry in advance." I opened the link, an Instagram story. It had been captured just hours ago. There was Laurel standing barefoot on a beach, laughing into the camera. Clark was beside her, shirtless and smiling. Isla danced just behind them in the surf, her arms outstretched like wings. The caption read, "Sun-kissed and grateful." Holiday joy with the best people on earth, heart emojis, sunshine, palm trees. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. The sick mother-in-law, the sudden cancellation, the last-minute excuse. It hadn't been real. I clicked back, clicked again, found another post on George's page, weeks old. Hawaii, here we come. Can't wait to spend the holidays with my boys. They'd been planning it for a while, not just days, weeks, and Laurel hadn't told me, hadn't admitted it, hadn't even tried. She'd let me sit at that table, roast in the oven, stockings hung, pretending she was holding hands by a hospital bed, not sipping cocktails on a beach. I didn't feel betrayed. I felt erased. And worse, familiar. Because that's how my mother made me feel all my life. Small, optional, a variable in someone else's narrative. It wasn't just that Laurel lied, it was that she had learned how to lie like her grandmother did, gracefully, elegantly, with a smile that looked like love but wasn't. I looked around my house, still decorated, still hopeful, and felt that ache swell into something sharp, a stillness that screamed, and this time I listened. Grief has many faces. Some cry, some scream. Mine straightened the picture frames and vacuumed lines into the carpet. The day after Renee sent me the Instagram story, I spent 2 hours reorganizing my spice drawer, alphabetically, then by frequency of use. I needed order, I needed distraction, I needed anything but the image of my daughter, barefoot in paradise, while I reheated the roast I made for a family that never arrived. I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop, pulled the photo back up. I hadn't been able to stop thinking about it. The lei around Laurel's neck was pink and gold, fresh orchids, not the cheap plastic kind. Her dress was linen, white, with embroidered flowers on the hem. I remembered that dress. I'd given it to her 2 years ago, back when she still called me on Tuesdays, just because. Her hair was pulled back in a braid, damp at the ends. Clark's hand rested lightly on her hip, familiar, possessive. His face was tan, his expression smug in the way only men who think they've gotten away with something can be. Behind them, Isla spun in the shallow surf, arms stretched like she might take flight. There was nothing accidental about the photo. It had been staged. Framed for warmth, edited for glow, posted for applause. I stared at Laurel's smile. It wasn't the one I remembered from her childhood, the gap-toothed belly laugh kind. This one was curated. Clean. A smile meant to say, I've chosen this life, and I'm happy with what I chose. I closed the laptop. It was noon. I hadn't eaten. Instead, I poured a third cup of coffee and stared out the window at my frost-covered garden. The world outside was white and brittle. Inside, I was burning. The doorbell rang. Renee. She came in without waiting, arms full, 2 lattes, a brown bag that smelled like cinnamon, and her signature air of righteous indignation. I brought muffins, she announced, and a desire to yell on your behalf. I couldn't help it. I smiled. She dropped everything on the table and pulled off her gloves. You look like someone trying not to scream into a throw pillow. That obvious. Renee tilted her head. You've got that tight jaw, the one that says you're choosing internal combustion over confrontation. I sat down and took a sip of the latte. Vanilla, just how I liked it. She lied, Ren, I said. She didn't just cancel last minute. She planned that trip, weeks ago, and never said a word. Renee opened the bag and handed me a muffin. So what are you going to do? I don't know. You're going to say something, she said. You're not going to sit here and let your daughter rewrite you out of her holidays and her honesty. You're going to remind her that you exist. I broke the muffin in half but didn't eat it. She's not cruel, I said, just a lost. She's not stupid either, Renee replied. She made a choice. You get to make one too. I wanted to agree. I wanted to believe that standing up for myself wouldn't just make me look bitter, but part of me still feared that if I rocked the boat, she'd stop calling altogether. I picked up my phone, started a message. Hope your mother-in-law is enjoying paradise. Must be a miracle recovery. Deleted it. Typed again. I saw the photo. I know you lied. Deleted again. Renee watched me with that look she got when her teenage son tried to talk his way out of consequences. Say what you need to say, she urged. Even if you never send it, get it out. So I opened my notes app instead and wrote, You could have just told me. I would have been hurt, but I would have understood. What I can't understand is how easy it was for you to lie, to pretend I didn't matter enough for the truth. I stared at the words until my eyes blurred. Renee was quiet now, letting me have the space. Then she said softly, "It's not just this, is it?" I shook my head. It's every birthday she forgot, every call she let go to voicemail, every time she chose them over you. A tear slipped down my cheek. I didn't wipe it away. "She used to need me," I whispered. Renee reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "She still does, but she's convinced herself that needing you makes her weak." That landed like a stone in my chest. "I tried to be different," I said. "I tried to love her loud, open. I never made her guess where she stood." "You did everything right, Ellie." "Then why does it feel like I failed?" Renee exhaled. "Because you taught her to love, but someone else taught her to lie. And now she's still learning who deserves the truth." I put the phone down. No message sent, but I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't grief anymore. This was anger, slow, focused, earned, and I wasn't going to bury it this time. There are versions of Laurel I keep tucked away in memory. Small, flickering truths I revisit when her silence feels too sharp. One of them is from when she was 7. She'd knocked over a bowl of cereal and burst into tears before I even reacted. Her hands shook as she scrambled for paper towels, saying, I'm sorry," over and over like it was a ritual. I had knelt beside her, wiping the milk while holding her close. "It's just cereal, baby," I said. "Accidents don't make you bad." But the fear was already rooted. She was always a soft child, observant, quick to notice tension in a room. She had my laugh and Henry's way of leaning into kindness like it was instinct. But somewhere, she began to apologize more often than she smiled. And that apology grew legs when she married Clark. I hadn't been invited to their engagement party. "Just a small gathering," she'd said. "Clark's family only." As if I weren't family, as if I were something extra, unnecessary, but polite to acknowledge. Clark's mother, Georgia, had always worn tragedy like perfume. Subtle at first, then suffocating. She was the kind of woman who could turn a compliment into a correction. "Lovely dress, Laurel. I had one just like it, before I lost all the weight." "I'm so glad you're helping Isla with her reading." Of course, Clark read at a 4th grade level by age 5. The first Christmas Laurel spent with Georgia's family, I didn't get a phone call, not even a message, just a picture posted online. Laurel smiling beside Georgia, both wearing matching aprons, Isla between them holding a gingerbread man. I remember staring at the photo, noticing Laurel's eyes. The smile was there, but the light was gone. I asked her about it the next day. "Why didn't you call?" "Just 5 minutes." She paused. "It was a lot. Georgia wasn't feeling well. Clark said I needed to be present." Present, as if my presence had become optional. Over the years, Georgia's illnesses became a regular script. Migraines, panic attacks, mysterious digestive issues. They arrived just before any big event. Isla's birthday party I hosted, the book launch I invited them to, the weekend getaway Laurel and I planned for Mother's Day. Every time, Georgia fell ill, and every time, Laurel would cancel. I began to recognize the pattern, not just of absence, but of erasure. It wasn't just that she couldn't come. It was that she no longer felt she had permission to. And Clark, he made it sound logical. "She has enough stress already," he once said on a speakerphone call. "We don't want to overwhelm her with travel or scheduling." As if I were a burden, as if love could only survive by minimizing mine. Renee saw it too. "She's not weak," she said one day after I recounted another missed visit. "She's just twisted into a shape they prefer." It hit me like a slap, because it was the truth. My mother, Sylvia, had done it with shame. Georgia did it with sickness, but the result was the same. Control masked as care. They made their daughters smaller by calling it love. And now Laurel was shrinking, apologizing for her joy, dimming her light, rationing her affection. I didn't blame her, not entirely, but I did feel the burn of history repeating itself, and this time, through my own bloodline. The real crack came days later. I couldn't sleep, so I sat with my tea and laptop, mindlessly clicking through hospital directories. I remembered something Renee had said. You know Georgia's a drama queen, but have you ever checked if she was actually admitted? I hadn't. Until then, it was easier than I expected. A few clicks, a patient directory, and one long, still moment. No admission under Georgia Heller in the county's hospital system for the dates surrounding Christmas. None at all, not even an ER visit. Nothing. She had lied. They had lied. And Laurel had played along. The room spun a little, though I hadn't moved. I stared at the screen, that absence of record louder than any diagnosis could have been. She wasn't sick. She just didn't want Laurel to leave. And Laurel, my daughter, who once cried when she scraped her knee and told me, "You're the only person who makes it better," had chosen that lie over me. I shut the laptop. Everything inside me quieted. Not numb, not shocked, just resolved. There's a kind of peace that comes with confirmation. When you stop second-guessing yourself, stop wondering if maybe you were too much or not enough, when you see clearly that you were simply inconvenient to someone else's control. I wasn't imagining it. They didn't want me to belong, but the difference now? I no longer needed their permission. There's a specific taste to guilt, like something overcooked and underseasoned. Familiar, bitter at the edges. I've known it my whole life. Learned to live with it. Like a kitchen ghost I stopped trying to banish. The night after I confirmed Georgia hadn't been hospitalized, I didn't rage. I didn't call. I didn't even write another draft of the text I'd never send. I did what I'd always done when the world tipped sideways. I cooked, not for a crowd, not for the holiday I'd been denied, just for the memory of what Christmas used to be. A small roast chicken this time, not the grand ham I'd originally bought. Mashed potatoes whipped just the way Laurel liked. Fluffy, rich, a touch of garlic. Cranberry compote chilled in a crystal dish. 2 servings, one for me, one I plated and placed across the table. Habit is stronger than heartbreak. I set the table again, though less formally. No napkin rings, no centerpiece. Just the 2 plates, quiet and waiting. I lit one candle. Jingle Bell Rock played faintly on the old record player, a song that used to make Laurel grab my hands and twirl around the living room, laughing so hard her hair came loose from its clips. Henry used to clap along from the recliner, offbeat and delighted. Now the song felt like a lie. The plate across from me stayed untouched. The mashed potatoes grew a thin skin. The cranberry sauce melted slowly, forgotten. I sat in silence, my fork resting against the edge of my plate. I thought about all the ways I had been too much for Laurel, too emotional, too invested, too available. I remembered her 16th birthday when I surprised her with a cake shaped like a stack of her favorite books. She blushed as her friends laughed, not at the cake, but at how extra I was. "It's sweet," she said later, not meeting my eyes. "But maybe next year, something simpler." Or the college drop-off, when I cried openly outside her dorm. Clark had raised an eyebrow. "You're not sending her to war," he'd said. After that, I learned to cry in my car. Even Isla's first preschool recital, when I'd driven 4 hours and brought flowers, Laurel had pulled me aside. "You don't have to do so much, Mom. It makes me look like I can't handle things." I'd smiled, said nothing, but I remember the sting, the shrinking, the unspoken suggestion that my love embarrassed her. I used to tell myself she'd understand when she had a child, that she'd call me one day, overwhelmed and tearful, and say, "Now I get it." But that call never came. Instead, she drifted further, pulled by Clark's tight expectations and Georgia's looming shadows. They taught her to resent warmth, to question softness, to treat emotional presence like a burden instead of a gift. And still, I set a plate, because some part of me couldn't stop hoping. When the food grew cold, I didn't throw it away. I covered the plate in foil, labeled it with her name, and placed it in the fridge. The way I had for years, the way you do when you're waiting for someone who might show up late. Then I picked up my phone. I opened the camera, took a photo of the place setting, soft candlelight, untouched plate, empty chair, no filters, no captions. I sent it to her, no words, no explanation, just the image. 5 minutes later, the message showed read. Nothing came back. I set the phone down, my chest tight, my hands still. That night, I stood at the sink washing dishes, listening to the last of the record player spin into silence, and I whispered to no one. If love like this makes me too much, then I was never asking for the right kind of daughter. The reply came in under 5 words. Please stop making me feel guilty. It's Christmas. No mom, no apology, no context, just the tone of someone who felt cornered by love and couldn't recognize it anymore. I stared at the message for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. I thought of 100 things I could say, 100 ways I could remind her that she was the one who lied, the one who disappeared, the one who traded our traditions for a beachfront brunch and silence. But I didn't type a single word. Instead, I turned off my phone. Then I packed a small bag. I didn't tell Renee. I didn't leave a note. I just grabbed the essentials and drove north along the coast until the town I lived in felt like a memory pressed between book pages. I stopped at a quiet inn with a view of the water. The clerk didn't ask why a woman my age was booking a holiday weekend alone. She just smiled, handed me a key card, and told me breakfast was served until 10. My room was small but warm. White sheets, floral curtains, the faint scent of eucalyptus. I dropped my bag and collapsed into the bed fully clothed. For the first time in a long while, I didn't dream of the past. I just slept. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. I wrapped myself in the complimentary robe and stepped onto the tiny balcony. The sky was a watercolor blur, purple and pink at the edges, the ocean mirroring it in glints. I wrapped my fingers around a cup of hotel coffee and listened to the quiet. No one needed anything from me. There were no expectations, no chairs to fill, no performances to fake, just breath and sea and space. I hadn't been alone in decades, not like this, not by choice. When Henry died, I was surrounded by casseroles and condolences. When Laurel left for college, I filled the quiet with community boards and bake sales. I had always defined myself by what I could do for others. Now there was only me. I spent the day wandering, bought a scarf I didn't need, read a mystery novel in one sitting, walked along the sand until my calves ached. I let myself be still, without performing strength or grace. That evening, I sat in the hotel lounge with a journal I hadn't opened in years. The leather was cracked at the edges, the spine soft from age. I wrote without planning to. A letter, to Laurel. Not one I'd send, just one I needed to write. Dear Laurel, I miss who we were before you learned that love meant choosing sides, before you decided that being close to me meant being far from him. I understand more than you think. I understand being pulled between who you are and who someone expects you to be. I lived that life. I broke away from it, for you. But now, I wonder if you even recognize the difference between guilt and grief. Because if my presence makes you feel guilty, it's only because you know something precious was left behind. You don't owe me anything. But I hope someday you'll remember that love doesn't keep score. It just waits. I stopped writing, let the ink dry, then closed the book. It didn't make me feel better, but it made me feel real. Later that night, Renee called. I answered, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I went away, I told her. Just needed to step off the stage for a bit. I figured, she said. You've got a right to your own escape. Then she added hesitantly, I found something. On accident. She told me she'd been helping Laurel move boxes into a storage unit last spring, one of those quick favors daughters ask of people they trust when they don't want to ask their mothers. I didn't snoop, she said, but her phone slipped and a voicemail played, from her therapist or maybe an old one. My breath held. She was crying, Ellie, like really crying, saying she felt like she was being ripped in half, said she didn't know how to love you without losing Clark. Said she felt trapped between two women, one who needed her to be soft and one who demanded she be strong. My stomach twisted. She said, I don't know who I'm allowed to be anymore. I can't breathe between them. I didn't speak. Maybe she never sent it, Renee continued, but she said it, and that means something. I nodded slowly. Yeah, it does. When we hung up, I sat on the bed, the ocean wind brushing against the balcony door. Laurel wasn't heartless. She was just lost. And maybe, just maybe, she was waiting for someone to tell her she didn't have to choose between versions of herself. Maybe she could belong to both. Maybe she didn't know that yet. But I did, and for the first time in months, I felt the tiniest sliver of hope crack open the grief. I hadn't driven down Myrtle Avenue in over 3 decades, and yet the turns still came like muscle memory. Left at the crooked stop sign, right past the hollowed out grocery store that once sold penny candy. The past never forgets its shape, even when the buildings try to. My childhood home sat at the end of a narrow cul-de-sac, hidden behind a row of wind-bent pines. It looked smaller than I remembered, not just in size, but in presence. Once grand and meticulous, it now sagged inward, like time had been pulling at its bones. The porch steps groaned as I climbed them. Paint peeled off in sun-bleached curls. A shattered porch light dangled like a broken limb. I pressed the key into the lock, surprised it still worked, and stepped inside. The air smelled of dust and mildew and something faintly metallic. I stood in the entryway, the scent of history thick in my nose. The wallpaper had started to come loose, curling at the edges like forgotten invitations. I reached out and touched it, thin, brittle, floral, the same pattern that had once lined the hallway like a spine. I moved slowly, my boots echoing on the wooden floorboards. The house was empty, but not silent. It creaked with memory, whispered with the echoes of footsteps long gone. In the living room, the mirror above the mantel was cracked, one long fracture cutting diagonally across its surface. I saw myself reflected in fragments, a younger woman in the shards, a girl with wide eyes and a nervous smile. I leaned closer, noticed a smudge in the corner of the glass, and just for a second, I remembered my mother standing behind me, fixing my collar for a family photo. She'd done it without speaking, without meeting my gaze. Her hands precise, distant. She was always beautiful in an unreachable way. Red lipstick, tight curls, a wardrobe of pressed blouses and brittle smiles. To the world, she was grace incarnate. To me, she was unreachable. But as I walked into her old bedroom, I felt something shift. The closet door was ajar. Inside, most of the clothes were gone, but on the top shelf sat a shoebox wrapped in ribbon, dust-coated, untouched. I brought it down and opened the lid. Photographs, dozens of them. Not the ones I remembered in the heavy albums, but candid, worn snapshots. And there, halfway through the stack, was a picture I'd never seen. My mother. She was standing in a garden, a young woman in a sundress, barefoot, smiling at the camera like it had caught her mid-laugh. She wasn't posing. She wasn't composed. She looked alive. I stared at that photo for a long time because I had never seen her like that. Never seen her soft or joyful or unguarded. Who took that picture? Who was she smiling for? And what happened to that version of her? I sat on the floor, the photo trembling in my hand. Was it possible she hadn't always been cold? Was it possible life had carved her into the woman I knew? Sharp, brittle, precise, not by nature, but by necessity. Suddenly, every scolding, every disapproving glance, every withheld hug felt less like cruelty and more like armor. Protection from a world that punished women for softness. Maybe she taught me what she knew. Maybe she was trying to teach me survival. Maybe I had done the same. My throat tightened. Had I done this to Laurel too? Had I tried so hard to undo my mother's legacy that I gave my daughter too much, too soon, too loud? Was my love another kind of pressure? I didn't know anymore. The line between victim and villain had started to blur. Grief is a strange thing. It isn't always about who's gone. Sometimes it's for who never got to be. I wept then, not for what my mother did, but for what she didn't get the chance to unlearn. I folded the photo, tucked it into my coat pocket, and walked through the rest of the house like a woman saying goodbye to someone who had already left. By the time I stepped back into the daylight, I wasn't sure who I was mourning. Her, me, or the versions of us that never made it past the front porch. I didn't want to send it. Not because I was unsure of what it said, but because I knew exactly what it would stir. The article had landed in my lap by accident. One of those late-night spirals where search bars become confessionals. It was clinical, straightforward. Covert Emotional Manipulation in Parent-Partner Triangulation. The title was bland, but the content made my chest tighten. There were lines about guilt as a control mechanism, about how illness, real or imagined, becomes a shield, about how love can be weaponized when children are taught to manage everyone's comfort but their own. It felt like someone had reached inside my house and sketched a diagram of our lives. I read it twice. Then I emailed it to Laurel. No message, no subject line, just the link. I didn't expect a reply. I wasn't even sure I wanted one. It was the only way I could speak without sounding like I was accusing her, without saying, "Look what you've let them do to you. Look what you've let them do to us." 3 days passed, nothing. The fourth day, I didn't check my email. I went on a walk instead. Winter had begun to soften around the edges. The sidewalks still crunched underfoot, but the air carried less bite. When I came home, the blinking cursor on my inbox caught my eye. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" I opened it, breath held. Just one sentence inside. "Can we talk? I'm free tonight." I stared at it for a long time, unsure if I was angry, relieved, or both. That night, the phone rang at 8:07 p.m. I let it buzz twice before answering. "Hi," Laurel said, voice thin. "Hi," I replied. There was silence. Then a sigh. "You sent me that article." "I did." Another silence. "I wasn't sure if you meant it for me," she said. "I did." She exhaled, the sound shaky. I read it twice. The first time I wanted to throw my phone. The second time I cried. I waited. I kept thinking, but this isn't me. But then I saw the parts that were. And the parts that were you. And her voice cracked. I didn't know how to call. "You just did." That quiet stayed between us, not empty, but heavy. "I didn't want to choose," she whispered. "But I thought if I didn't pick her, I'd lose him too." My heart thudded. "He said it?" I asked. "Yes." She paused, gathering herself. "Last year, when we missed your birthday dinner, I tried to make it up to you privately. I told Clark I wanted to bring Isla over just for dessert, just to see you, and he said, 'If you keep choosing her over us, there won't be an us.'" I sat down slowly. "And I didn't know what to do," she continued. "I kept thinking, if I lost him, what would happen to Isla? What if I tore everything apart just to give you a few hours of peace?" "Laurel," I started, but she cut me off. "I'm not defending it. I'm just telling you. I've been living like I'm in a three-way custody battle where I'm the prize and the prisoner." Her voice broke. "I thought I was protecting everyone, but I was just letting myself disappear." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My chest ached. "He's not cruel," she said. "Not in the way people mean it. He doesn't yell, he doesn't hit. He just freezes me out when I do something he doesn't like. And Georgia, she's all tears and weakness, and you wouldn't understand what it's like for me. I've been so tired." I closed my eyes. "I just wanted things to be easier," she whispered. "But every time I chose her, I lost a piece of you, and I kept pretending it didn't matter." "It matters," I said gently. "I know." We sat in that raw honesty together, just two women generations apart, finally facing the walls they'd both built and inherited. "I'm not asking you to fix this," she said. I needed you to know." "I do," I said. There was a pause. Then, softer, "Can I come see you next week?" "Just me. No Clark. No Isla. Just us." Tears slipped down my face, and this time I let them. "I'd like that," I said. And even though it was just a sliver, just a spark, I knew something sacred had returned. Not forgiveness, but truth. And that was the first step toward home. The winter garden had always been my favorite. Not because it bloomed, God no, but because it endured. While everything else wilted or fell silent, it stood as a monument to what could survive with nothing but breath and patience. I'd pruned it the day before Laurel arrived, not for aesthetics, just to make space. The kind you can't clear with words alone. She pulled into the driveway just after 2. Alone, no Clark, no Isla, just her and the familiar rust-colored coat she used to wear in college. That coat had meant something once. Freedom, independence, the girl who took late-night philosophy classes and made pancakes at midnight. Now it looked like a shell she was trying to fit back into. She stood by her car for a long moment before coming up the path. I opened the door, didn't smile too much, just nodded and said, "Come on, let's walk." The cold air nipped at our faces as we stepped into the garden. The beds were stripped back. Bare branches, brittle leaves, dormant roots hiding beneath frost. But there was beauty in the starkness. The rosemary bush clung to green. The lavender, though dry, held the ghost of its scent. We didn't talk at first, just walked, each step crunching beneath our boots, each breath visible. I led us to the arbor, where the roses would bloom come May. For now it was just thorns and waiting. She paused there, ran her hand along one of the bare canes. "They're sharp," she said softly. "They're honest," I replied. We stood in silence again. Then I turned to her and said, "You're not broken. But you're not free either." Her shoulders shook. Then came the sound, the one she'd held in for too long. Not a sob, not a scream. A quiet, tired wail, the kind that leaks out when your body forgets to hold it in. "I'm so tired, Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm tired of performing peace, of pretending I'm okay. I'm tired of managing Clark's moods and George's illnesses and your hurt and my shame. I'm tired of being the hinge everyone turns but no one holds." She dropped her face into her hands, and I let her cry. When she looked up, eyes red, mouth trembling, she said, "I don't know who I am when I'm not choosing sides." I reached for her hand, held it, not tightly, just enough. "You don't have to choose," I said, "not with me. I won't be one more person asking you to split yourself in half." She blinked at me, confused. "I don't need to win," I continued. "I just need to be real with you. I just need you to stop pretending you're fine when you're bleeding inside." She stared at me for a long time, then nodded. "I want that too," she whispered. The wind picked up slightly, shaking the dried seed pods. "I thought if I stood still long enough," she said, "this would all pass, that Clark would stop needing so much, that Georgia would get better, that you would move on. But nothing passed. It just layered." "That's what guilt does," I said. "It buries us, layer by layer, until we forget where our body ends and the weight begins." She looked around the garden, eyes scanning the brittle stalks. "How do you make something grow again?" she asked. "Same way you survive winter," I said. "You don't rush it, you just keep breathing, and you stop pretending the frost isn't real." She let out a breath, her lips trembling. "Isla asked about you last week." "What did you tell her?" "That you were still her grandma. Always had been." My heart didn't leap. It settled, finally. We stood there a little longer, and for the first time in years it felt like we weren't walking through what had died. We were standing in what might one day bloom again. There's a stillness that comes after pain is spoken. Not resolution, not relief, just the sound of breath that's no longer held. Laurel started therapy again without telling me at first. I learned about it during one of our walks. She mentioned it offhandedly, like saying the weather was colder than expected. "Wednesdays," she said. "Dr. Healy, she's good." I just nodded. I'm glad. And I was, for both of us, because that same week, I sat in a folding chair in the back of the community rec center, listening to women whisper truths they'd never said out loud before. The support circle wasn't large, 6 of us, counting Irene, who ran it like a porch gathering. Most of the women were mothers. All of them knew the ache of being needed once, then not at all. We didn't trade advice, we just offered space. And when it was my turn, I told them, "I used to believe my daughter was taken from me by another woman. Now I'm realizing it was silence that did the stealing." Heads nodded, no one rushed to fix it. In that room, I didn't feel like a failure. Just a mother grieving the shape of love she used to recognize. That night, when I came home, I opened the drawer where I kept the ashes of old drafts, letters I'd written in anger, hurt, desperation. One in particular had haunted me, the letter I wrote after seeing Laurel in Hawaii, then burned the next morning because I thought the words no longer mattered. But I remembered every one of them. So I wrote again, this time slowly, with no heat, no accusation, just truth. "Laurel, I've spent too long speaking in silence. Too long giving you pieces of myself shaped by guilt or fear or grief. This is what I never said clearly enough. I see the mother I became. But more than that, I see the mother I wanted to be. I wanted to be a place you could land without fear. Someone who didn't ask you to choose. Someone who held space instead of holding score. I know I made mistakes, but I also know I tried. Every single day. If you ever wonder where I stand, know it's beside you, not behind you, not waiting, just here, loving you, as I always have. I folded it carefully, no envelope, no need. Laurel was coming over that Sunday, just her, for tea and shortbread, but the letter never made it to her, because Saturday morning there was a knock at my door. Clark. He didn't smile. He didn't scowl. He looked like a man holding back a storm. He held the letter in his hand, creased, slightly damp at one corner. "I found this in Laurel's purse," he said, voice tight. I didn't ask why he was looking. I didn't flinch. "Did you read it?" I asked. He didn't answer right away, just stared at me with eyes that looked older than I remembered. "She cried after she read it," he said. "That wasn't the goal." "I know," he said, almost too quietly. "That's what surprised me." He stepped inside without asking and stood in the foyer, just past the place where we'd once exchanged stiff greetings on holidays. "She told me she's going back to therapy," he said. "She told me too." He looked at the letter again, then at me. "It's kind. Too kind, maybe." "I don't do ultimatums," I said. His laugh was soft, bitter. "My mother does." And then, almost like the words slipped out without permission, he said, "She used to lock herself in her room for days, said she was too tired to parent. I'd leave notes under the door." The silence after that was different, not tense, just bare. "I don't want to be like her," he said, still looking at the letter. "But I don't know how else to be, except rigid, except in control." "Being in control isn't the same as being steady," I said. He finally looked at me, really looked. "Laurel's starting to see that," he said, "and I don't know what that means for us. She deserves to see all of it, even if it's hard." He handed the letter back. "I shouldn't have opened it," he said, "but I'm glad I did." Then he turned and walked out. I closed the door softly behind him. When Laurel arrived the next day, I didn't mention the visit. I didn't need to. Her smile was tired, but real, and I knew the words had reached her, one way or another. There are places you leave because they hurt, and places you return to, not because they've changed, but because you have. Laurel and I started therapy together on a Monday afternoon in March. The room was spare, 2 armchairs, a fern in the corner, and a box of tissues already half empty. Our therapist, Maureen, was older than both of us, with a voice like river stones, smooth, grounded. The first session was mostly Laurel. "I never meant to shut her out," she said. "I just didn't know how to include her without tearing my life apart." I listened, not to respond, not to defend, just to witness, because that was the work now, building trust from observation, not obligation. After a few weeks, the stiffness softened. We'd grab coffee after sessions, then lunches. I started texting her funny headlines. She'd respond with voice notes, short, awkward at first, then laced with laughter I hadn't heard in years. One Sunday, she brought over a lasagna she'd made from an old recipe card I'd written years ago. It was burnt at the edges and perfect in the middle. We laughed over it, her cheeks pink as she tried to scrape off the crispy bits. "You always made it look easier," she said. "It never was," I smiled, and that became the rhythm. Therapy on Mondays, shortbread on Thursdays, healing in between. The first time I saw Isla again, she ran to me with cautious joy, like a girl remembering a dream and trying to confirm it was real. She'd grown taller, her face sharper, but her eyes were still Laurel's, still mine. We were in Laurel's kitchen, Laurel chopping vegetables, Isla perched on a stool. The afternoon light stretched long across the countertops. "Grandma," Isla asked suddenly, "why did you stop coming to our house?" I froze. Laurel paused too, knife hovering mid-air. I knelt beside Isla, looked her in the eyes. "Because some grown-ups stopped telling the truth," I said. "And sometimes when that happens, love has to wait until everyone is ready again." She blinked. "Were you mad?" "A little," I said honestly. "But mostly I was sad." "Did you stop loving me?" "Not for a single second." She nodded. okay. And just like that, the ache in my chest loosened. That night, after Isla went to bed, Laurel and I sat on the porch with mugs of lukewarm tea. She asks a lot more questions now, Laurel said. She deserves answers. Laurel nodded. I've started telling Clark when he's crossing lines. I told him I need space, that I need this, to figure out who I am when I'm not just bending around everyone else's expectations. I didn't cheer. I didn't advise. I just reached for her hand, held it gently. You don't have to pick a side, I said, but you do have to pick yourself. I'm trying, she whispered, and it's harder than I thought. It always is. That night, as I drove home, I realized something profound. Home wasn't the house I lived in. It wasn't Laurel's dining room or the porch swing where Isla liked to nap. It wasn't a place at all. Home was a hand held across time, a truth spoken gently, a memory remade with kindness. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was walking toward it. Not alone, but together. The house smelled like cinnamon and rosemary, two things I always associate with warmth. One sweet, one sharp, like memory. Snow had dusted the edges of the porch, and the garden beds lay silent under a soft quilt of white. Inside, the lights on the tree blinked gently, steady, quiet. No flashy colors, just warm gold and soft white, like the hush before a favorite song begins. It was Christmas, the first one I didn't spend alone in a decade. Laurel arrived early, carrying a tray of pecan rolls and a sparkle in her eye I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. Isla darted in behind her, already pulling off her boots, cheeks flushed, arms full of hand-drawn cards. Renee brought wine and her infamous peppermint bark, muttering about how she didn't trust Laurel to bring anything that didn't involve vegetables. Clark wasn't there, by choice. He'd gone to visit his brother in Montana. Laurel's idea, gently suggested months ago. She said it simply, "This Christmas is for repair." And that's something I need to do without him. I didn't ask more. I just set an extra seat at the table, not for him, but for Grace. Laughter echoed through the kitchen as Laurel spilled coffee grounds. Isla sang Jingle Bells half a beat off tempo, and Renee argued with my oven. I watched from the doorway, mug in hand, my heart full in a way that didn't feel fragile anymore. The living room was warm, not from heat, but from presence. The tree stood tall, its base piled with mismatched gifts, wrapped in brown paper and red string. Isla had written every tag in crooked block letters. One of them just said, "To love." And we all agreed that one was meant for everyone. We opened gifts slowly. Renee handed me a scarf she swore was accidentally fashionable. Isla gave me a locket with a photo of the three of us, taken under the arbor in the spring. Laurel gave me a book of poems, bookmarked at the one that read, "There's no such thing as too much love, only too much silence where it should have lived." I saved her last gift for last. It was in a flat box, wrapped in brown paper. No ribbon. Inside was a photo frame, the Hawaii picture, the one I once saw through tears and betrayal. Laurel on the beach, smiling in her linen dress. Clark behind her, hand at her waist. Isla dancing in the background, the ocean kissing her ankles. But something was different now. Underneath the photo, in Laurel's handwriting, was a caption. "Sorry I wasn't home, but I'm home now." I stared at it, heart thudding. The past hadn't been erased, it had been reframed. And in that quiet, Eleanor, the woman I had become, looked at the version of herself who once sat alone at a holiday table and whispered, "It was never about Christmas. It was about being chosen." Laurel met my eyes. "I didn't know how to come back," she said. "So I figured I'd start with the truth." I reached for her hand, held it, squeezed it, no speech, no spectacle, just the moment. We sat there, a circle of women with battle scars and tired laughter and love that had finally found its voice. Outside, snow kept falling. Inside, light stayed on. What if the people we love the most are sometimes the ones who silence us the deepest? If you've ever set a table for someone who never showed up or questioned if your love was too much, this story was for you. Dive deeper into the echoes of family, the weight of unspoken truths, and the quiet power of being chosen. Because sometimes the loudest stories are the ones we whisper only to ourselves.